Alright, let's do some hunter tips so that hunters stop dying. First thing that people die to all the time is aspects, and cheetah at level 20 increases your move speed. The thing a lot of people die to is if they take damage with cheetah on, they get dazed. So if you are expecting to be hit, don't have this on. Next thing is hunter is really difficult for movement. They have to control not only their own movement, but also the pet's movement. But something that really helps with controlling the pet in addition to yourself is macros. So I only use two. It's very simple. One macro says /pet passive. That's just going to do the same thing as if I clicked this passive mode. The other button I use just says pet attack. That's going to be the same thing as this button here. So using this, I can easily tell my pet to go target that. If I want him to come back, I just press the other one. I generally leave it on passive because you may not want it to react defensively. For example, if a ranged mob hits you, your mob will then go and chase it, and you might not want that. So I leave it on passive usually. For the pet's abilities, Growl is one that you get by default. It doesn't taunt the mob, but it will generate a lot of aggro to help keep it on the pet while you're just shooting your bow. So that's great. There are other abilities, and they are a little bit complicated for new players. To get these other abilities, you actually have to go out and tame a pet, Screech rank 2. This is from a vulture in Shimmering Flats and 1,000 Needles. So down here, you'll find these vultures here. Screech is a spammable skill, and I recommend that any new player use a Screech pet. The reason is because Screech only says it does 12 to 16 damage here, but that's not the main benefit of it. It also lowers the attack power of all enemies in range. We can see it says there. Now, the lowering of the attack power itself is good. That actually does significantly increase the tankiness of your pet. But the main benefit of it is that it's not just doing 12 damage worth of threat. Applying debuffs in this game generates a lot of threat as well. So just having this ability makes my pet generate a ton of aggro. It's going to be a lot more than another pet that's just using Claw or Bite. It's very good for holding aggro, and it is an AoE ability. So, for example, if I go and tell my pet to pull a second mob, I'm going to tell him to hit this one here, and he'll automatically get aggro on this one as well, just from Screech. You can see he's still hitting the right raptor, but he also has aggro on the left. And from just one or two Screeches, even if I multi-shot, I don't pull aggro. Now, you can see my pet is dying a little bit, so you also want to use your own health bar as a resource. So something I could do if I accidentally pull multiple mobs, I could intentionally tank this one to use my life as a resource. Don't be scared, hunters are tanky. The other thing to know about pets is you have to manage their happiness. So if you're totally new, you don't know this, you want this to always be green. It makes your pet do 25% more damage. If it's not green, for example, if you just tame a new pet or if he hasn't been fed in a while, you have to feed the pet. Pets only eat certain types of food. And you'll be able to mouse over this tab here. If you open your character sheet, go to pet, you can see the diet that they eat here. The level of the food also matters, so if I just feed him some level 1 food, let's see if we can see an example of that. I'll give him some mystery meat. And then in the combat log we can see he's getting 35 happiness from that. If I feed him a mutton chop, okay, he's also getting 35 from that. I don't have any trash food, but certain foods are lower level and they'll give less happiness. You can see that here. The other thing about feeding your pet that might not be obvious if you're new, if I feed my pet this meat, it doesn't immediately eat it. It gives him a buff for 20 seconds that'll increase his happiness over time. If my pet gets attacked, or if my pet attacks, it will cancel that buff. So we see it says 8 seconds here. If I tell my pet to attack, it's gone. So when you're feeding your pet, you have to wait a second to let them finish eating. So something that can help you to find ammo, this questy button here, if I click it, I can track things on my map. So if I go to the vendor tab here, I can select ammo and pet food, for example. And now, if I go to my map, let's go to Orgrimmar. Where the hell's Orgrimmar? Now you can see this ammo icon on the map. So I can see this guy's a gun merchant, he sells bullets. This guy is a bow merchant, he sells arrows. And general goods usually has both. So I turned off Growl, so my pet is not going to generate a lot of threat. And I'm going to go blast this raptor here. What Intimidation does, well, the first thing it does is it's going to generate a ton of threat. So I just did a ton of damage to this mob. I'm going to Intimidation my pet. Boom. He doesn't even have Growl on, and I'm now at 50% threat, we see there. So Intimidation does a ton of threat. It's very useful for snap aggroing onto your pet. The other thing it does is it stuns the target for 3 seconds, so it's good to use it as an interrupt. Has a 1-minute cooldown, but you can do some key interrupts like things that heal, things like that. If I pull 2 mobs here, I'm going to go ahead and have my pet tank one of them, but I'm going to pull one over here. Hunters can attack 2 times at the same time, actually. Look, I'm going to shoot my bow, swing my sword. Shoot my bow, swing my sword. Shoot my bow, swing my sword. So I'm attacking 2 different things at the same time here. There's some quests, for example, that might spawn like a wave of 2 mobs, like that Harpy one and 1,000 Needles. I intentionally multi-shot them, let my pet tank one, and I tank the other, and I can just melee swing it to kill it really quickly. You can even use that to multi-shot things in melee range of you. If I'm tanking one mob and I'm pretty close to my pet who's tanking another one, I can multi-shot that mob and it'll hit both of them. Some of the early traps you get, I think, is Immolation Trap. But it does a very efficient damage per mana. So we can see here it does 215 damage for only 90 mana. So that's actually more than most of your abilities. Like, for example, this Serpent Sting does 210 damage for 115 mana. So Immolation Trap is just strictly better in terms of damage per mana. The best trap in the game, in my opinion, is Frost Trap, though. So Frost Trap you get at a slightly higher level. I don't recall which one, maybe 24 or something. What this trap does is it will slow an AoE area. So let me find some melee mobs here. These are all melee. So if I put down a Frost Trap, this basically will put down a slowing field. It slows them for a lot. And it lasts a very long time too. So I could just keep running these mobs over this, and they can't even hit me. So this trap's really good, especially in dungeons. So in dungeons, you'll find a lot of times there'll be big packs of mobs, and warriors in this game cannot tank more than 2 targets easily. It's very difficult for them. So this trap is very useful to put down like pretty much every pull there's going to be 3 or more mobs. Just, run up close, but not too close to aggro them, drop the trap, and then the warrior can pull the mobs into it. That way, if any mobs leave to fight to hit the ranged people or the healers, they'll be slowed and the warrior has tons of time to react. So you can't trap in combat. So if I'm already in combat here, I can't use my trap. But if we feign death, it leaves combat. So at level 30 you get feign death. This is a very useful ability. I don't know if I can do it here actually, but we can see as soon as I feign death, I did that a little quickly, I left combat, and now I've still been fighting this mob the whole time, but I've trapped in combat. So all I did there is I feign death, and then it lets me drop the trap, and I can go back to fighting. This is actually more difficult than it seems, because if I feign death while my pet is fighting, I will still be in combat too. So if I try that again, and there, let me get rid of my macro. I'll put feign death on my bar over here. So my pet's fighting that. I want to trap. I'm going to feign death. I can't. It's because my pet's still fighting. So to make this work, the simple thing to do is you need to make your pet leave combat as well. So for example, I could slow the mob, tell my pet to go on passive with my macro that I made earlier there, and then I could feign death and it would leave combat. Now, something I've done to make that a little more foolproof is use a macro. I just have a macro here that does /pet passive and then cast Feign Death. Now this is still not foolproof, so you might want to just manually do it because the macro happens too quickly, so it won't work every time. So for example, what we would do is I'll use my manual pet passive keybind here. So I'm going to slow the mob, bring my pet out of combat, Feign Death, trap, we're good. If the pet's still in melee, we saw you can't do that, right? So slightly more advanced, but being able to trap in combat is very valuable. Just remember, if you're trying to do that, your pet can't be fighting. So that's Feign Death. Feign Death also is not foolproof itself, so something you have to be aware of. If I pull this mob, and I want to drop aggro because I'm scared I'm going to die, I'll Feign Death. Because my pet never entered combat, the mob leaves, and we're totally safe. If my pet was in combat as well, and I Feign Death, I will drop all the aggro, but it'll still be on my pet. So it's a little bit more difficult to run away from it in that situation. The other thing to know is Feign Death can fail. So there's a small chance that when I Feign Death, it simply doesn't work, and the mob will just keep hitting my dead body on the floor. The easiest way to notice that, I believe this is true, I don't fully remember myself, but when I Feign Death, you can see my health bar and mana bar goes to 0 there. If it gets resisted by the mob, I believe my health will still be visible. So another thing that can be nice to know is when you're just fighting mobs in the world, you don't really have to do anything. I just Serpent Sting and auto attack and tell my pet to go in. This mob's level 36, that's 1 level higher than me. I'm going to end this fight. I'm full health, full mana. My pet is pretty much going to be full health. So this is the power of Hunter. We can just keep fighting forever just by auto-attacking. You don't have to do anything. Now we can do a lot of things. So generally what I like to do is conserve my mana so that when something bad happens, let's say I pull 2 mobs at once here. Oh no, we've pulled 2 mobs. Now we can dump our mana. I'll Serpent both of them, dump a multi-shot, maybe even arcane shot, Raptor Strike this guy. Maybe we want to Feign Death and trap here. Reserpent this guy, multi-shot him. Arcane shot again. I'm out of mana now, but we just deleted those mobs instantly. Probably killed 2 faster than we killed the 1 earlier. So mana management is really nice because hunters can dump their mana very easily to do large amounts of damage. Now, you don't always want to do that because now if something bad happened to me now and I pulled 3 mobs and I'm out of mana, now I can't do anything because I'm out of mana. So mana management, very important, and knowing how to dump your mana. Multi-shot is basically the best ability to be dumping mana into. It does tons of damage even on single target. Another more basic thing to know, I guess, is just auto-shot itself. So you see here auto-shot says has a 2.5 second cooldown. That's just based on my weapon speed. When I'm shooting my bow here, it actually has a hidden cast time. So, for example, if I start shooting and move, start shooting and move, start shooting and move, start shooting and move, I'm never going to actually shoot. There's a 0.5 second cast time, so you have to stand still every once in a while to actually get the shot off. So you could be ruining your damage if you're moving too much as a hunter. You want to use this 2.5 second cooldown as your window of time to move in, and then stand still for that 0.5 seconds to get the actual shot off. There is an add-on that can help you with this, it's the swing timer. Personally, I don't like it. You certainly don't need it to perform, but it can be useful if you like to have that visual indicator of when your shot is coming back up. I just find it's very annoying to have this constantly moving bar in the middle of my screen. And it is a fairly simple rhythm game. You can just get used to your weapon, know how long you have to move before you should stand still again to shoot. The last thing I'll say is don't be afraid of aggro. This mob's hitting me, I'm totally fine. Hunters are tanky as fuck. This is especially the case in dungeons. I see a lot of the time newer hunter players, the moment they get aggro, they just Feign Death and drop it because they think the tank should be the one who's being hit. In Classic WoW, the tank is frequently the person who is not being hit. They can't, it's not retail, they can't easily hold aggro on multiple mobs. If you have aggro on 1 or 2 mobs out of a pack, just keep it. It's totally fine. If you're getting low health or it's causing disruption to the group, then you could feign, but don't just panic feign randomly. It can be useful to take some damage yourself. You can even use that time to be getting melee swings on the mob that's hitting you.